The shrill scream pierced through Terminal C's ambient hum, like a fire alarm at midnight. "Help me! Someone help me! That man is kidnapping those children." The woman's voice cracked with manufactured hysteria as she clutched her phone, stabbing at the emergency number with trembling fingers. Around her, travelers stopped mid-stride, their coffee cups suspended in air, their conversations dying in their throats. David Chen had been having the kind of morning that promised good things. His daughter Sophie bounced beside him, her pigtails swishing as she chattered about seeing dolphins in Hawaii. His son Marcus dragged his oversized backpack with determined 8-year-old pride, already wearing the snorkel mask his grandmother had bought him for the trip. The check-in counter stretched before them like a gateway to paradise, and David felt that rare flutter of anticipation that came with perfectly planned family vacations. "Daddy, can we get pineapple pizza when we get there?" Sophie asked, tugging at his sleeve as they approached the counter. "We can get whatever you want, sweetheart," David replied, ruffling her dark hair. The morning sun streamed through the terminal's massive windows, casting everything in golden light that made even the usual airport chaos seem magical. Behind them in line, a woman with bleached blonde hair, pulled into an aggressive bob, was growing increasingly agitated. Her son Tyler had tried to cut in front of the Chen family earlier, and when David had politely asked him to return to his place in line, the boy's mother had fixed him with a stare that could have frozen jet fuel. Now she watched David interact with his children with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspicious packages. "Ma'am. Excuse me. Ma'am." The airport security officer's boots echoed against the polished floor as he ran toward them. Behind him, more officers followed, their radios crackling with urgent codes. "Sir, we need you to step away from the children immediately." David's world tilted sideways. The officer's hand was already moving to his radio, and other travelers were backing away, as if David had suddenly become radioactive. "I'm sorry. What's happening here?" "Sir, please step away from the children. We've received a report of a possible abduction in progress." The officer's voice was steady, professional, but his eyes were hard as stone. "Kids, can you come over here to us?" Sophie's hand tightened around David's fingers. Her voice came out small and confused. "Daddy, what's wrong? Why is the man talking like that?" Marcus stepped closer to David, his snorkel mask sliding down over one eye. "Dad, I don't understand what's happening." The blonde woman pushed forward, her face flushed with righteous indignation. "Officer, I'm the one who called. Look at them. Those children are obviously not his. Look how scared they are." She pointed at David with a manicured finger that shook with what appeared to be genuine distress. "I couldn't just stand here and watch this happen." David's heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. "Officer, these are my children, Sophie and Marcus Chen. I have their passports right here, our boarding passes, everything." He reached for his wallet with movements deliberately slow and visible. "Sir, don't reach for anything. Keep your hands where I can see them." The officer's voice sharpened. "Kids, I need you to come with us. We're going to get this all sorted out. Okay?" "No." Sophie's scream cut through the terminal like breaking glass. "That's my daddy. Don't take me away from my daddy." She wrapped both arms around David's leg, her small body shaking with terror. Marcus, older and somehow understanding the gravity despite not comprehending the why, stood frozen. "Dad, what did we do wrong?" The crowd had grown now, phones appearing like mushrooms after rain, recording everything. Social media feeds would buzz with this within minutes. David could already see the headlines forming, could feel his life fracturing into before and after this moment. "Please." David's voice broke as he knelt to Sophie's level. Sweetheart, go with the nice officers. Mommy will be here soon, and we'll fix this whole misunderstanding. I promise. The female officer who had appeared beside her male colleague spoke more gently. Come on, kids. We're just going to sit in a safe room and wait for your mom. Okay? Would you like some juice? As they led his children away, Sophie looking back over her shoulder with tears streaming down her cheeks. David felt something die inside his chest. The blonde woman stood behind the officers now, her arms crossed, her face set in lines of satisfaction that she tried to disguise as concern. Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us as well to give a statement, one of the officers told her. She nodded enthusiastically, clearly relishing her role as the hero of this unfolding drama. The interrogation room smelled like industrial disinfectant and fear. David sat across from Detective Morrison, a tired-looking man in his 50s, who had clearly seen enough of humanity's worst impulses to last several lifetimes. The metal table between them reflected the harsh fluorescent light, creating shadows that made everything look stark and unforgiving. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. We have a witness who claims she observed what appeared to be an abduction in progress. Children who seemed distressed and unfamiliar with their alleged captor. David's hands trembled as he pushed his driver's license across the table. Detective, Sophie was born on March 15, 2013. She has a birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon on her left shoulder. Marcus was born January 2nd, 2015. He's allergic to peanuts and carries an EpiPen in his backpack. Last month, Sophie lost her first tooth and put it under her pillow for the tooth fairy. Marcus just learned to ride a two-wheeler and crashes into our mailbox every single day because he hasn't figured out how to turn properly yet. The detective's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. These could be details you learned through observation. Mr. Chen. Then ask them. David's voice cracked with desperation. Ask them what I make them for breakfast every morning. Ask them what book I read to them every night. Ask them what song I sing when they have nightmares. Meanwhile, in a room 3 doors down, Sophie sat curled in a chair that was too big for her legs dangling like a broken doll's. Marcus sat beside her, his hand protective on her shoulder, despite being only 2 years older. The victim advocate, a kind woman named Janet, had brought them juice boxes and crackers, but neither child had touched anything. Can you tell me about the man who was with you? Janet asked gently, her voice trained to comfort traumatized children. Sophie looked up with eyes red from crying. That's my daddy. His name is David Michael Chen, and he works at the computer company, and he makes me pancakes that look like Mickey Mouse. And he always checks for monsters under my bed, even though I'm too old for monsters now. Marcus nodded emphatically. He teaches me math homework at the kitchen table, and he let me paint his nails purple last week, because I wanted to practice for when I paint Sophie's nails, and he never got mad even when I got paint on his work shirt. Janet made careful notes, her heart sinking with each detail that painted a picture of genuine family intimacy. These weren't the stilted responses of coached or frightened children. These were kids talking about someone they loved without question. Where is your mommy right now? Janet asked. She had to work this morning, but she's supposed to meet us at the airplane, Sophie said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She has meetings with important people, but Daddy said she would be there before we got on the plane to Hawaii. In another room, Karen Whitman, the blonde woman who had made the call, sat with Detective Rodriguez. Her story had grown more elaborate with each retelling, her conviction seeming to strengthen even as inconsistencies crept in around the edges. The children seemed terrified, she insisted, her hands gesturing dramatically. The little girl was clinging to him, but not in a loving way. In a desperate way, like she was afraid of what would happen if she let go. And you observed this behavior over what period of time? Detective Rodriguez asked, his pen poised over his notepad. At least 15 minutes, maybe 20. I was watching closely because something just felt wrong about the whole situation. Karen's voice carried the conviction of someone who had convinced herself of her own righteousness. Detective Rodriguez made a note. According to the security timeline, the Chen family had been in line for exactly 7 minutes before Karen called 911, but he didn't share that information yet. The sound of high heels clicking rapidly across linoleum announced Lisa Chen's arrival before anyone saw her. She burst through the terminal doors like a woman possessed. Her business suit wrinkled from the rush, her usually perfect hair escaping from its professional updo. "Where are my children?" she demanded of the first uniform she saw. "Someone called me and said my husband and kids were involved in some kind of incident." "Where are they?" The officer, clearly not equipped to handle a mother in full protective mode, stammered something about procedures and waiting areas. Lisa's eyes flashed with the kind of fury that had made her one of the most formidable corporate lawyers in the city. "Officer, let me be very clear. My name is Lisa Martinez Chen. I am an attorney with Morrison, Bradley and Associates. My husband David Chen and my children Sophie and Marcus were supposed to board Flight 447 to Honolulu this morning for our family vacation. If they are being held without just cause, you and this airport are about to face the kind of legal scrutiny that makes careers disappear." Within minutes, Lisa was sitting across from Detective Morrison, her presence filling the small interrogation room with electric tension. David looked up as she entered, and the relief in his eyes was so profound, it was physically painful to witness. "Lisa, thank God. They separated me from the kids. Some woman claimed I was kidnapping them." Lisa's jaw tightened as she absorbed this information. She placed her driver's license, marriage certificate, and the children's birth certificates on the table with the precision of someone laying down a royal flush. "Detective Morrison, I assume these are my children. This is their father. We are a family. And unless you have some compelling evidence of wrongdoing, this detention ends now." Detective Morrison examined the documents while Lisa continued. "Sophie and Marcus are biracial. I am Latina. David is Korean American. Our children happen to look more like me than their father, which is apparently confusing to people who make assumptions based on appearances." The detective's shoulders sagged slightly. The pieces were falling into place in a way that made this whole situation feel increasingly like a catastrophic misunderstanding, built on prejudice and hasty judgments. "Mrs. Chen, we had to respond to the call. A concerned citizen reported what appeared to be a potential abduction. We have protocols." "And did your protocols include separating traumatized children from their father, based solely on one person's concern?" Lisa's voice could have cut glass. "Did your protocols include any verification before tearing apart a family in public view?" Before Detective Morrison could respond, there was a knock on the door. Officer Jenkins, the terminal security coordinator, entered, looking like someone who had just discovered a bomb in his locker. "Detective, we need to see you outside. We've reviewed the security footage from this morning, and there's something you need to know about the complainant's story." The security office was cramped and smelled like burnt coffee and electronic equipment. Multiple monitors showed different angles of Terminal C, and Officer Jenkins had queued up the relevant footage to timestamp 8:47 a.m. Here's the Chen family arriving at the check-in line. On screen, David and the children appeared, looking relaxed and happy. Sophie skipped beside her father while Marcus dragged his backpack with characteristic 8-year-old determination. "Now watch this." Jenkins fast-forwarded to timestamp 8:52 a.m. "Here comes Karen Whitman and her son. Watch what happens next." The footage showed Tyler Whitman darting forward, squeezing past the Chen family to get ahead in line. David was clearly visible speaking to the boy, gesturing politely toward the back of the line. The interaction lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Karen Whitman approaches now. Jenkins continued. Watch her face. On screen, Karen appeared, her expression already set in lines of indignation. She spoke to David briefly, her body language aggressive, her finger pointing. David's response appeared calm, measured. Then Karen grabbed her son's hand and pulled him back to their original position in line. Here's where it gets interesting, Jenkins said, advancing the timestamp to 8:54 a.m. Watch what she does immediately after returning to her place in line. The footage showed Karen pulling out her phone, her movements sharp and angry. She watched the Chen family for exactly 2 minutes before dialing. Her face, during those 2 minutes, transformed from irritation to what appeared to be calculated decision-making. She's not watching them with concern, Detective Morrison observed grimly. She's watching them with intent. It gets worse, Jenkins said. Audio pickup from Terminal C, timestamp 8:56 a.m. Karen's voice came through the speakers. Tinny, but clear. 911, I need help. There's an Asian man here kidnapping 2 children. They look terrified. He's forcing them toward the check-in counter. I think he's trying to take them out of the country. The room fell silent, except for the humming of electronic equipment. On the monitors, the footage showed Sophie laughing at something her father had whispered in her ear, while Marcus examined his boarding pass with intense concentration. How long between the line-cutting incident and her 911 call? Detective Morrison asked. 4 minutes. She watched them for 4 minutes, then made a deliberate decision to call in a false report. Jenkins's voice carried the weight of someone who had just watched human nature reveal its ugliest face. Detective Morrison rubbed his temples. 23 years in law enforcement, and he had never felt quite this sick about following procedure. We need to reunite this family immediately, and we need to have a very different conversation with Mrs. Whitman. The reunion happened in the victim advocate's office, and it was the kind of moment that reaffirmed faith in the fundamental bonds of family, even as it highlighted the cruelty that prejudice could inflict. Sophie launched herself at David the moment she saw him, her small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. Daddy, I knew you would come back. I told them you were my real daddy. But they said they had to ask questions. Her words tumbled over each other, muffled against his shoulder. Marcus approached more cautiously, his 8-year-old mind still processing the inexplicable cruelty of adults who had separated him from his father for reasons he couldn't understand. Dad, why did they think you were a bad guy? You're the best guy. Lisa gathered her family into her arms, her professional composure finally cracking. I'm so sorry this happened to you, all of you. This should never have happened. David held his children tighter, feeling their heartbeats against his chest, breathing in their familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and playground dirt. We're together now. That's all that matters. But even as he said it, David knew that wasn't entirely true. Something had been broken this morning that would take much longer than a family embrace to heal. His children had learned that the world could be arbitrary and cruel, that being innocent wasn't always protection enough. Detective Morrison entered the room, his expression carrying the weight of necessary but unpleasant tasks. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I owe you and your children an apology. The security footage has revealed that Mrs. Whitman's call was made in direct retaliation for your intervention in a minor line-cutting incident. Her report was knowingly false. Lisa's attorney instincts sharpened immediately. Detective, are you saying this was a deliberately false report motivated by racial bias? The evidence suggests that Mrs. Whitman made a calculated decision to file a false emergency report after being corrected about proper line etiquette. The timing and circumstances strongly indicate this was retaliatory rather than genuinely concerned. Outside the security office, Word had begun to spread through Terminal C about what had really happened. Social media posts from witnesses were painting a picture that looked increasingly damning for both Karen Whitman and the airport's handling of the situation. A traveling mama posted, "Watched airport police tear crying children away from their father because some woman lied about kidnapping. This is what racism looks like in 2023. Justice Fortune family." Asian business traveler shared, Terminal C. Right now, Asian dad falsely accused of kidnapping his own kids. Kids are biracial. Karen couldn't handle being called out for line cutting. This is absolutely disgusting. Witness to Injustice wrote, "I saw the whole thing. Family was happy. Kids were laughing. Then boom, police everywhere because some racist woman made a false 911 call. Those children's screams will haunt me forever." The posts multiplied exponentially, each share adding another layer of public outrage. Videos of the initial separation, Sophie's terrified screams, David's desperate compliance with officers who treated him like a criminal, spread across platforms with the viral intensity of social media justice. By the time Karen Whitman was escorted back through Terminal C to leave the building, a crowd had gathered. Not a mob exactly, but a collection of travelers and airport workers who had heard the story and felt compelled to bear witness. "There she is!" someone called out. "That's the woman who made the false report." Karen walked faster, her head down, her son Tyler clutching her hand and looking confused by the sudden hostility surrounding them. She had expected to leave as a hero, having saved children from a predator. Instead, she found herself running a gauntlet of disapproving stares and whispered condemnations. "How could you do that to a family?" A woman's voice called out. "Those children were terrified because of you. You should be ashamed of yourself," added another voice. Karen's face flushed red as she reached the terminal exit. She turned back once, perhaps hoping to offer some explanation or justification. But the sea of disgusted faces offered no sympathy. She had become the villain in a story she had intended to control. Inside the airport administrative offices, a very different kind of conversation was taking place. Airport Director Patricia Williams sat across from the Chen family, her usually steady composure showing cracks of genuine distress. "There are no words adequate to express how sorry I am about what happened here today. Our security protocols failed your family in the most fundamental way possible." Lisa, back in full attorney mode, leaned forward. "Ms. Williams, your protocols didn't fail. They worked exactly as designed, to prioritize the word of one adult over the obvious emotional distress of children and the consistent story of their father. The question is, why those protocols exist in the first place?" "We're committed to a full review of our procedures," Williams said, though her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "And of course, we want to make this right for your family." David, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Ms. Williams, making this right isn't about procedures or compensation. It's about acknowledgement. My children learned today that being innocent isn't always enough, that being with their father isn't always safe. How do you make that right?" Sophie, who had been coloring in a book provided by the victim advocate, looked up at the mention of safety. "Daddy, are we still going to Hawaii?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Their original flight had long since departed. The vacation they had planned for months, saved for carefully, anticipated with the pure joy that only children could muster, had evaporated in the space of a few hours. "Would you like to go to Hawaii?" David asked gently. After everything that happened today, Marcus considered this with the seriousness of a child who had been forced to grow up several years in a single morning. "I want to go if we can all stay together. I don't want anyone to take me away from you again." Williams seized on this opening. "We can absolutely arrange that. New flights, First class. Whatever you need to make this trip happen. It's the least we can do. But Lisa shook her head. The flights aren't the issue, Ms. Williams. The issue is that my children experienced trauma in your facility because your staff believed the word of a racist over the obvious reality in front of them. The issue is that my husband was treated like a criminal for being Asian while traveling with children who don't look sufficiently Asian to satisfy some stranger's prejudices. 3 days later, the story had taken on a life of its own. News outlets had picked it up. Legal experts were weighing in on false reporting laws, and airline industry publications were discussing the broader implications for security protocols in an era of increased social awareness. Karen Whitman's name had been released after charges were filed. Filing a false police report was a misdemeanor, but the aggravating circumstances, racial bias, involving children, causing family separation, had elevated the charges significantly. Her employer, a marketing firm that prided itself on diversity and inclusion, had placed her on immediate unpaid leave, pending the outcome of her legal troubles. Her social media accounts had been deleted, but screenshots of her previous posts revealed a pattern of complaints about certain people and their behavior in public spaces. The airline had banned her from future travel on their aircraft. Other airlines were considering similar actions, effectively grounding her from commercial aviation indefinitely. But perhaps most significantly, the incident had sparked a broader conversation about implicit bias in emergency response procedures. Child protection advocates were calling for reforms that would require additional verification before separating children from adults, especially in cases involving racial discrepancies in appearance. The Chen family eventually did make it to Hawaii, though not on their originally planned timeline. The airline had indeed provided first-class accommodations, and the resort had upgraded their suite when news of their ordeal reached management. On their first morning in Maui, David sat on the beach, watching Sophie and Marcus build sandcastles with the single-minded determination of children who had decided to squeeze every ounce of joy from their delayed vacation. Lisa joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the resort restaurant. "How are you doing, really?" David considered the question as he watched his children. Their laughter carried on the ocean breeze. "I keep thinking about that moment when they led Sophie and Marcus away. The look on Sophie's face. The way Marcus asked what they had done wrong. They're resilient," Lisa said, though her voice carried its own uncertainty. "Kids bounce back." "Do they?" David asked. "Sophie asked me yesterday if the police were going to come take her away again if she was too loud. Marcus has been staying closer to me than usual. They're processing this in ways we don't fully understand yet." Lisa sipped her coffee, watching their children through new eyes. "The lawsuit will help, not just financially, but it sends a message that this kind of thing has consequences." "Will it, though?" David asked. "Karen Whitman faces a misdemeanor charge, and maybe a fine. She lost her job, but she'll find another one." Meanwhile, our kids learned that the world can be arbitrary and cruel, and that being innocent isn't always protection enough. As if summoned by their conversation, Sophie ran over, sand coating her legs up to her knees. "Daddy, Marcus says fish can't really fly, but I saw one jump really high. Can fish fly a little bit?" David smiled despite the heaviness in his chest. "Well, some fish can jump really high out of the water. Flying fish can glide for quite a distance. So maybe Marcus is a little bit right, and you're a little bit right too." "I like it when we're both right," Sophie declared, then ran back to her brother to share this diplomatic solution to their marine biology debate. 6 months later, the settlement was finalized. The airport authority had agreed to substantial financial compensation and, more importantly, had implemented new training protocols for security staff. The training specifically addressed implicit bias and required additional verification procedures before family separation could occur. Karen Whitman had pled guilty to filing a false police report and received 6 months probation, community service, and mandatory bias education counseling. Her civil liability was still being determined, but early indications suggested the judgment would be substantial enough to impact her life for years to come. The Chen family had used part of the settlement to establish a scholarship fund for children from multiracial families, recognizing that their experience, while traumatic, had highlighted broader issues that deserved ongoing attention and support. On a quiet Tuesday evening, almost a year after the airport incident, David sat in his kitchen, helping Marcus with homework, while Sophie practiced piano in the living room. The normalcy of the moment felt like a gift after months of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and media attention. "Dad," Marcus said, looking up from his math worksheet. "Remember when we went to Hawaii, and that lady lied about us?" David's pencil paused mid-calculation. "I remember. What about it?" "I was scared that day. But also, I was really proud of you." "Proud of me? Why?" Marcus thought about this with the careful consideration of a child who had learned to process complex emotions. "Because you didn't get angry at the police, even when they were wrong. And you promised us everything would be okay. And it was—" Sophie's piano practice stopped, and she appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I was proud too. And I'm proud that we helped make new rules, so other kids don't get scared like we did." David set down his pencil and looked at his children. Really looked at them. They had been changed by their experience, certainly, but they had also been strengthened by it, had learned lessons about resilience and justice that many adults never mastered. "I'm proud of both of you," he said. "For being brave, for telling the truth, for being kind even when the world wasn't kind to us." Lisa appeared in the kitchen, home from another long day at the law firm. "What's everyone proud about?" she asked, kissing David's cheek before examining Marcus's homework progress. "We were talking about Hawaii," Sophie explained, "and how we helped make things better after something bad happened." Lisa nodded, understanding immediately. They had all processed the trauma differently, but they had processed it together. The family bonds that Karen Whitman had tried to question with her false report had ultimately been strengthened by surviving her assault on their integrity. "You know what I'm proud of," Lisa said, settling into the chair beside David. "I'm proud that we're still here, still together, still planning family vacations and helping with homework and practicing piano. We didn't let someone else's hate change who we are." As evening settled over their suburban street, the Chen family continued with the ordinary miracle of being together. Marcus finished his math homework with his father's patient guidance. Sophie played her way through a simplified version of Fur Elise with increasing confidence. Lisa prepared dinner while sharing stories from her day. The trauma of that morning at the airport would always be part of their story. But it was not the end of their story. They had survived an assault on their family, had seen justice served, and had used their experience to create positive change for others. In the end, perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that ordinary families living ordinary lives with ordinary love could withstand extraordinary cruelty and emerge not just intact, but stronger. That children could learn about injustice and still believe in fairness. That trust, once broken, could be rebuilt more carefully and deliberately than before. Karen Whitman had intended to destroy a family with her false accusation, born of petty revenge and deeper prejudice. Instead, she had inadvertently strengthened their bonds, highlighted important social issues, and created positive changes that would protect other families from similar ordeals. The Chen family's ordinary Tuesday evening, filled with homework and piano practice and dinner preparation, was proof that love and resilience could triumph over hate and fear. It was proof that sometimes the most powerful victories were the quiet ones, measured not in dramatic confrontations, but in the simple persistence of human dignity and family bonds. Outside their kitchen window, the last light of day faded into evening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments of ordinary grace. But tonight, they were together, they were safe, and they were home.